Welcome back. Today we're going to get started with Go and SingleStore stored procedures. You can grab this repository in the link in the description below. To get started with Go and SingleStore stored procedures is a quick three-step process. First, we'll sign up for a free SingleStore license. Second, we'll spin up a cluster in our chosen environment, containers, virtual machines, or cloud. And third, we'll adjust the connection details and run our app. Let's dig in. First, sign up for a free license. We'll fill out this form, and once we're done, we'll land here in the customer portal. We can take a look at our free tier licenses and other details about our account, but I clicked here on SingleStore clusters and created a new cluster. So let's open SingleStore Studio and start with this cluster. Our username is admin. We'll set the password that we used when we created the cluster. And now we can see the health of our database. Total memory used, total disk used, and we can see our database is healthy. Let's switch over to SQL Editor and start to create some of the schema. Here in init.sql, we'll grab all of the content that we need to set in place. First step, we'll create the database. I see I can use Control-Enter to run these, so I'll hit Control-Enter and I'll use that database. Let's create the table. Now, let's create all the stored procedures that we'll use to create, read, update, and delete the content. Now with the stored procedures in place, let's test it out. We'll create a new row. We got back ID 1. Perfect. Step 1 is done. Step 2 is done. Now let's adjust the connection details in our app and we'll run it. Here in our app we can see we're using the standard MySQL driver that comes with Go. We create a struct to mirror our database table, and here's our connection details. Let's go to the portal and go grab the connection details. I'll grab this endpoint right here and I'll set it in place right here. Our username isn't root, it's admin, and we'll set our password and database to match. Great. Now let's run our application. That worked great. Let's take a look at the code and see what we did. So we're using the standard MySQL driver here. We'll open a connection, and then we'll create a new row. We'll read that row back out and show that row's details. Then we'll update the row. So instead of saying inserted, it will now say updated. Then we'll read all the rows in our database. And finally, we'll delete the row. Let's take a look at the code in each function. For create, we'll call this stored procedure, passing in the parameter. We pass in this question mark so that we are safe from SQL injection. For read 1, we will call the read by ID store procedure, passing in that detail. For read all, we'll call the read all store procedure, execute that statement, and cast it into our struct. For update, we'll call the update store procedure, passing in the ID and the new content. And delete is quite straightforward. We'll just call messages delete. We'll authenticate, then we'll create a row, we'll read that row back out, we'll update the row, we'll read all the rows, including the one we created and the one that we built when we initialized the database, and finally we'll delete the row. Let's run this app again. We inserted row ID 3, then we read row 3 back out. Here's row 3, it's inserted and the date. We updated the row, so no longer does it say inserted, it now says updated. We see that we've got our updated row and the original row we created. Finally, we deleted the row. That worked great. You can get started with Go and SingleStore stored procedures today with the starter repository in the link in the description below. Thanks for watching.